and welcome to the Boundless Book Club. As always, you've got me, Andrea,
Ahlam,
and Annabelle.
And today we have a guest with us. Sara Hamdan is the editor of Think with Google MENA, but you might know her from the jealousy-inducing blog holidaysinheels.com. Sara, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. And honestly, right now it's more like holidays to my fridge.
That's very relatable. Today we're going to be talking about two of our favorite topics, travel and books. So sitting here in sunny Dubai, one of the world's favorite tourist destinations, we have beaches, shopping, lots of fantastic dining options and entertainment. So there are lots of ingredients that people look for in a holiday. So I want to ask you, our listeners, what you want from a holiday. Please do send us your comments on social media or an email to comms@emirateslitfest.com for a chance to win a selection of books handpicked for their stunning settings. Now, I want to ask you, Sara, what makes a holiday for you? Where do you want to travel and which books would take you there?
I think for somebody who's always loved travel, and as you mentioned, I have a travel blog, it's a form of escape, and it's a place where you feel like you have time to yourself and to have new experiences. So it's funny that you mentioned we live in a beautiful sunny spot with beaches, and yet that's what I'm drawn to when I do go on vacation anyway. So it's okay that I stayed here this summer due to the pandemic. I grew up in Greece, so for me, the beach is something that's a happy place. It always has been, and I feel so lucky to have this dynamic now where I'm in Dubai. We have the beach year-round, and then I get to go to Greece to visit my parents over the summer. But really, it's just I seek out new destinations in books, maybe cultures that I haven't experienced before. Sometimes I'll read about places, and it'll whet my appetite to visit them. Everything from far-flung to neighboring cities. So it's really far and wide, I would say. It's impossible to choose a place. It's like asking for a favorite song.
I'm just going to say, like, living in Dubai, we're so spoiled for choice. And with Emirates being so connected to so many destinations direct, we're used to traveling multiple times a year. And this year has just shown us how much we took for granted, I think, with travel, because it's, we're just used to doing it. Lucky to be able to do it a lot more regularly than people who live in different other parts of the world where it might take them a lot longer to get there. And so it's really, got us to reflect this year. But I'm really missing greenery and that kind of nature, which we don't have over here. We do have like mangrove trees and gaff trees, but we don't have that lush forest and cool breeze and, wildlife of that sort that we really miss. And when we travel, we go for long walks in parks. And that's what I'm really, really missing this summer.
Sara, you talk about the fact that even though you live here and there's, beaches, and you're still drawn to that when you go traveling. And I just wondered, so when you pick up a book that's got kind of a beach description or a beach setting, something tropical like that, do you immediately go, I'm at home, this is where I'm supposed to be? Or is that something that you want to like move away from when you're reading fiction or nonfiction?
When it comes to fiction, I just don't discriminate. Like, I'll read anything, not just fiction. I'll read cereal boxes. I'll read whatever you throw at me. So I'm very open to it. And I think the pleasure of reading comes with brand new experiences that maybe you don't have access to. So even settings that took place decades ago in a certain city that or something like that, it just gives this extra element that you may not be able to experience otherwise. For me, because of my background and where I grew up, I think the beach is just always, it's a place where nothing bad can happen. It's just a very happy place, and it evokes this, the smell of suntan lotion and the feeling of sand. I feel like it's a very visceral experience. So when I read about it, I respond very strongly to it. And when I go on vacation, I tend to pick up books that deal with beaches, even if it's something very light, like a light read, like Hotel Babylon. I don't know if you're familiar with that one. Takes place in a hotel, but the sequel takes place in the Maldives. Very silly, kind of gossipy light read. It's just a familiar territory, but that doesn't mean that I don't enjoy books that take place in, skiing somewhere in the snow, or I just don't discriminate. It's just something I can relate to more, I guess.
It's funny that you really like the description of like the feel of sand, because there are a couple of people in my life that would absolutely detest that.
Yeah, and a lot of people hate it. A lot of my friends who have young children say that they don't go to the beach because of that reason. They prefer pools, but it's just such a big part of my childhood, I guess.
Yeah.
And how can you hate sand? I mean, you can make sand castles out of it, and it's warm and it's cold. It's full of surprises. You can find little crabs that burrow in there. I mean,
absolutely.
When I do write a book one day, there is definitely going to be a beach scene. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, so for me, I'm a very nostalgic person. I think a lot of Arabs are. We always talk about the past. We love the past. But so for me, the kind of travel that I'm going to talk about today is sort of time travel. So it's more going back into like a state that I never experienced, but I always heard about from my mother and her sisters, where I think Arabs have this in common, where you have this old Arabian house, and then you would go and put the farshe or a frash, like we call it in Emirati, which is like the bedding on the rooftop, and then you would sleep on the rooftop at night watching the stars with the storyteller, whether it's your mom or grandma. Yeah, and that's like
what a beautiful tradition.
I know.
And what time of year would you do this, or would they do this?
I think they would do it in the summer, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, because I think in the winter they would go like if they had 2 or 3 floors in the house, they would go to the bottom where it's warmer. So I think this was a summer thing that they would do, where the stars are clear as well. And it wouldn't rain on them when they sleep. But I just always like fantasized about that setting. And so I picked this book called Pearls on a Branch by Najla Khoury. She's also the wife of a really famous Lebanese author called Khoury. But so this book is a selection of oral tales of generations of Arab women told to their children, and it says it's stories told by women to girls, and it's about women as well, and so there's a lot of interesting themes in the stories, but it's the women always come out as the heroine somehow, even though they've been through a lot of struggle. But Najla basically traveled during the civil war across Lebanon to Palestinian refugee camps, and they would perform little like puppet shows and about these oral story tales from Arabian women, and 30 of them were selected for this book. And it's just the simplicity of how the supernatural or magical things happen in their everyday life when storytelling is like a part of their daily life. And it's so, in Arabic storytelling, how you say once upon a time. In Arabic storytelling, you say kan ya ma kan. It either was or it wasn't. So you're not confirming what it is. So you say, kan ya ma kan fi qadim al-zaman, in the olden days. So it either was or it wasn't in the older days. So you're kind of not committing, but you're just saying this happened or didn't happen, but I'm going to tell my story. And it's just such a, unapologetic way of bringing the supernatural into your daily life and, getting kids to dream about all these amazing stories. And I really, really recommend them, because it's stories of like, kings and viziers and queens and shopkeepers and animals and Bedouins, and everybody interacts with each other in this amazing, like anything is possible, and there's always like a moral, and there's rhymes, and the stories like connect to each other in such an amazing way. Simple, but also really, really extraordinary. I'd really recommend this book if you want to travel back in time.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, can you remind us of the title?
Wonderful.
Yeah, the title is Pearls on a Branch, Oral Tales by Najla Khoury. So it's a translation.
And where did you get this?
Just at a bookshop. I think I got it at Kinokuniya or something like that.
I think I need
Honestly,
this.
I feel so nostalgic just hearing you say kan ya makan fi qadim al-zaman. It's I feel like oral storytelling is such a big part of our tradition, and especially through women, and sharing what they've been through and what their ancestors have been through. It's the way that we find out a lot of our history, because a lot of it wasn't written down anyway. And it does have this kind of magical realism element that I've always loved, to your point. I feel like just hearing you talking about it and describing the setting before with the mattress on the roof, I feel like I'm kind of there already. It's really, really lovely. This is one I'll put on my to-be read pile for sure.
Definitely. It's a good one for like the child within all of us. So definitely recommend it.
I was wondering before the podcast today who was going to do the travel back in time thing, because I knew one of us was going to find the loophole. But I had that question as I was looking through my choices and thinking about what we all might choose. And because there are so many books where I think particularly cities like Paris and New York and places like in London even, where you associate them not with the city that they are now, but say Sherlock Holmes's London, or like New York in the 50s. I'm thinking more of Mad Men now, rather than literature. But
I was thinking Austin Powers in London in the 60s.
See, we've got different frames of reference. But yeah, I wondered like how much of what we are drawn to in terms of like fiction making us want to travel places. Like, do you want to be in New York? Or like me, do you want to be in New York at Christmas in Will Ferrell, with the Will Ferrell movie Elf? Like, it's very specific. I don't necessarily think I want to go and like have a holiday in New York City or in any city. I think I just specifically want to be in that story's version of that city at that specific time. And do you feel that way about any like particular location? And have you then like gone somewhere and been let down completely because it's not what you thought it would be?
Good question. I don't think so.
For me, there's always been this voyeuristic element where you get to experience it through somebody else's eyes and maybe see things, witness things that you may not have noticed. When you were speaking, I was thinking about A Movable Feast, which is that Ernest Hemingway classic. It takes place in Paris. And you kind of, for any aspiring writer like myself, you kind of want to be like him and his cool artistic friends sitting at the cafe and breaking bread together and dipping it in the olive oil and talking about all these fantastic creative things with Picasso's muse and all of that. This is not something that I would ever be able to do myself. It's his Paris, and I love getting a glimpse through his eyes because he's a master of what he does. So I think there's that element of taking you out of your life completely and seeing something very, very different that you can't even get through film, I feel, because when you're reading someone's writing, you're in their head. And I find that so beautiful. It's one of my favorite things about reading.
Yeah, I literally booked a Paris trip after Midnight in Paris. I've done it in my life, so I completely relate.
Yeah, I ended up doing a writing course in Paris just because I wanted to be like him.
There was an episode where you spoke about I can't remember who it was, Ahlam, but you spoke about a book you're reading and how the group of friends were just having the best time and they had the best conversations. And I was thinking of that sometimes it's not necessarily the location, but you kind of wish that you were part of that conversation and had those friends and like you were at the table during this movable feast and, you know, tasting what they were tasting.
Yeah, it's a feeling, it's an experience that you kind of want to be a part of.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the more the writers actually bring to life the senses and the details of that experience, the more it makes you want to be in that moment or within the setting.
There's one of my favorite bookshops in London is this bookshop called Daunt Books, where they have a normal fiction section, they have a normal non-fiction section, and then the rest of the entire store is laid out by countries. So if I'm traveling to India, I can go to the India section and find like poetry from India and novels set in India and all this stuff. So you could just completely immerse yourself in your destination. And I absolutely love that, because you don't have to know where a book is set, and you don't have to have a recommendation, which you don't always have when you're planning a trip. And then you can just get a little bit of that experience of what it's like to actually have a life in the destination where you're going. So you come to it with a whole different understanding, which I love.
Awesome. That's awesome. And that's kind of like, solves the diversity issue that we've been talking about, in that then you become more conscious in that what section are you reading from the most. If it was laid out like that, very diverse, so you'd be very aware of what you're picking up. And I love that.
It's great. And it also makes you aware of how few novels are published in certain parts of the world as well, or from there in English. Which I guess has lots of reasons, but I remember traveling to Sri Lanka and looking for novels set there and not finding an awful lot.
So that's an opportunity for you to write one then.
But should it be me, or should it be someone from Sri Lanka?
A collaboration.
Yeah.
Did you said Sri Lanka?
Yes. Have you got one?
Martin Vikramasinghe selected short stories.
Excellent.
I picked it up from the Martin Vikramasinghe Museum in Sri Lanka.
Ah, yes, that one.
You can borrow it if you like. Yes,
thank you.
The one everybody knows.
Yes.
Awesome.
Okay.
So tell us about the books that you guys have selected for the theme today. Andrea, what about you? Let's start with you.
Okay, I've got a 2-for-1.
Ooh.
So Jessica Jarvely, who is a wonderful author who writes sort of domestic, cozy crime, I guess you'd say, recommended this book to me because I was talking about my ongoing obsession with Svalbard. I would love to go and see polar bears. Yes.
High five.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
I feel like the children would like that too.
I mean, it's such a fascinating place. I've been reading about it, reading articles on Google and various things, and they have like 6 months of the year where they don't see sun, but also 6 months of the year where the sun does not set. So imagine living there. You would absolutely go mental, and in a very serious way. So they have this little town, which is called Longyearbyen, which is the northernmost settlement for humans, permanent settlement. And everybody leaves their doors unlocked in case you need to run inside to get away from polar bears. That just blows my mind. So I'm getting to the book that I've chosen, which is called The One Memory of Flora Banks, which is written by Emily Barr, who you might be familiar with because she has actually written a lot of novels that are part of that sort of travel backpack genre. She wrote a book called Backpack, which was a typical backpack crime novel with someone going on the Southeast Asia trail. And this is her first young adult novel, which is about a teenage girl who lives in England, in Cornwall, who's got, I've completely forgotten the proper term for it. She's got the type of amnesia that means that she cannot form new memories, which she's had since she was 11, and now she's a teenager. It's a real type of amnesia. So she can remember what happened up until she was 11, and then she will form memories that will disappear within a few hours. So she remembers her best friend, but she doesn't remember the teacher in school, for example.
Anterograde amnesia?
Yes, thank you. That's the one. So she has no lasting memories until one day she kisses a boy at a party, and she remembers it the next day. So she then has this very strange sensation of having a memory, which she hasn't had before. And she obviously thinks this is connected to him. He is her best friend's boyfriend who's going to Svalbard to study at the Svalbard Institute. And she believes that her ability to form memories is connected to him. So she finds a way to follow him to Svalbard. And I'm going to leave it there. But it's just amazing if this is a location that you're really interested in to read a fictional account, of course, but someone who arrives there completely fresh, not knowing anything. She wears like a cotton dress and some tights and arrives in Svalbard. And there's snow everywhere and it's summer and the sun doesn't set. And she has this really weird experience of sort of not knowing what time it is or where she is. And it's amazing.
What year is this
fascinating.
set?
It's like now.
Okay. There's inexperienced and then there's not checking Google weather before you go.
Yes. Well, she was 11 the last time she formed a memory.
Even so.
Do you think the author traveled there or is from there?
Yes.
Or like how? Yeah.
Yeah. She apparently she was also obsessed with Svalbard. So she's traveled there on holidays and so on. And then she wrote this YA novel. And I'm not used to reading this type of YA, so I kept expecting something really awful to happen, but it's quite nice and gentle.
Love it. It sounds awesome.
Yes. Yeah.
And are there polar bears? Do they feature in the book? Important question.
A few.
Asking the real questions. I know you have a second book. Do you want to talk about your second book together?
No. So my second book is just Backpack, because we're talking about travel. And I did read Backpack back in the day when I think it might have just come out and I had just been on the Southeast Asia Trail because, that was what people did at the time. And that for me has lots of like weird nostalgia tied into it. I remember going to Vietnam and wondering where the glamorous people were because I was young and dumb.
Did you find them?
No, but I think what you learn from this novel is that the glamorous people are not important. It's what's inside that matters.
That's right. Mic drop.
And I think it's important that you listen to what's inside. And I'm going to come back to cold places and other things shortly. You asked what do you look for when you look for what do you look for in a holiday?
Yes.
And we're talking about kind of books that tie into that. And yes, I read quite widely. And so if I am reading a fiction or a non-fiction book that describes kind of a really great sense of place, my first thought is, well, that sounds like an interesting place to visit. I don't have that as much with cities because you know what you were saying, Ahlam, about kind of let's put COVID to one side for now, but the accessibility of various cities from particularly where we live in Dubai. Like the world is literally our oyster. So when it comes to armchair travel, I like reading about, places like, say, Svalbard or deserted islands or just crazy epic adventures, whether travel, memoir or fiction, because there are fewer and fewer places that are kind of untouched and left to explore, but there are a handful where that you're not necessarily going to visit in your lifetime. And though that is quite sad, at least we have, books. So I was thinking about this and thinking about what book to choose. And I've actually just started this. This is 60 Degrees North by Malachy Tallack. And Ahlam, I don't know if this is a problem that you have, but every year for the festival, there are authors' books that I buy that year, and then I don't get the chance to read until about 2 years later.
Guilty, definitely.
Yeah. Does that happen to you as well, Andrea? Yeah. So this is my catch-up read, and it's just been absolutely wonderful. So I'm going to read you a little excerpt and give you a bit of context. So basically what this travel memoir is about is basically Malachy Tallack lives in Shetland, so north of the UK, and this all starts, this journey that he takes on the 60th parallel north, which runs through Canada, Greenland, etc. It all starts kind of 2 months after his father passes away. So there's an emotional catalyst for the journey that he takes. So if that is something that speaks to you when you're reading nonfiction, like there needs to be some kind of emotional journey to it as well, it's a great book to read. If you're just in it for the travel and the description and the sense of place, that's all there as well. So this is where he goes to Canada, and there's this wonderful passage where he says, "For most in Canada, the North remains alien, a neighbor but a stranger. Many dream of it, but few ever wake up there. It is a place read about in books, seen in films and on television, but rarely visited. Viewed from afar, the region is tangled in contradictions. North means danger and adventure, but it also means refuge. It offers possibility and fear, beauty and horror. It is almost empty of people and yet overflowing with their imaginings." It's hard to stop there because the whole book is written like that. But that particular passage I wanted to read because I remember last podcast, Ahlam, where we were talking about hope, and you were talking about Alain de Botton.
Yeah.
And I can't remember, the School of Life, I think.
School of Life,
Yes.
yeah.
Right. So there was a whole section of that where you were talking about one of the weird contradictions about human beings is that we want the opposite.
Yeah.
So I loved his reference here to contradiction because I feel like that comes up, don't know about you, but it comes up for me personally when it comes to travel. And I noticed that when I was looking through all these books as well, is that ultimately my goal for a holiday is not anything relaxing. And I've learned that the hard way because I've gone on those holidays where I've planned like 10 days of relaxation. And by the second day, I want to scream. I feel like that we should be going back to, well, I feel like experiences and the weird stuff that you don't plan for are kind of the highlights of a trip, the ones that really push you out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And so I like reading books that talk about that push and that pull, that sense of wanting to be in a comfortable 5-star hotel and enjoying that, but also somewhere deep down wanting to be thrown into like a really dangerous adventure at the same time and constantly like wrestling with that whenever you make holiday plans.
It's such a difficult balance to find. You're like, I want to go and just be one with nature, but I want to be comfortable and somewhere clean. And it's just so difficult to have all of those things.
I think that sounds really beautiful. For us, the way that we manage to work around that is I'm a big planner. So I'm the type who will make an annoying itinerary that takes the fun out of a holiday because I want to know like where I've booked, which play and what restaurant we're going to see and all that. So
to make the most of the time, right?
Exactly, because I don't want to miss out. I have this fear of missing out, and you're going to this destination, you've made this effort. So I'll do that and for half the holiday, and then my husband is in charge of the remaining days where he does nothing. And then it ends up being really spontaneous. That's where the dangerous element comes in, a bit of the nature. So yeah, sometimes having someone else whose travel habits are different than yours play off of what you're planning, it can end up having like really, really amazing experience.
True, we're the same too. I'm always the one with the GPS in my hand, and he's like, what's the worst that could happen if we got lost?
You have a list in your head of all the terrible things that could happen.
Exactly.
So moving on from Svalbard and polar bears, what do you have for us, Sara? Where are you taking us?
I have the polar opposite of polar bears, so I'm taking you to the beach.
See what you did there.
I initially chose, you like that little pun? Just for you. I initially chose this book for superficial reasons because I like the red dress, and it's a Reese Witherspoon Book Club choice. It's called Next Year in Havana by Chanel Cleeton. It takes place in Cuba, which is a place I've always wanted to visit. As an American, it's a place I haven't been able to visit easily in the past. So it's always had this kind of forbidden allure, I think. And it's got the beach, which, as you know, is a big part of my life. I've always also loved salsa music, Cuban music. So I feel like it just ticks a lot of boxes for me. I might want to go there and not come back. So what better way to experience it than through a book? So this one, I have slight mixed feelings about it, if I'm honest. I really enjoyed the travel element, which is why I thought it was useful to discuss with you guys. It's about a woman named Marisol who goes back to Cuba to understand her grandmother's past. Her grandmother passed away and apparently had a secret love that the family didn't know about. And her experience answers a lot of questions about differences in their family and things like that. So I won't give too much away, but it's got this, very interesting tragedy set against the backdrop of war-torn Cuba. So what I really loved is all these beautiful descriptions of the beach, yes, but also of a city, an island that's kind of seen hardship, a lot of decline, but there's a strong resilience to people. And I think as Arabs, we can relate to a lot of that. There's a lot of very beautiful travel writing in particular that I liked. So I'll just read you a really short passage if that's okay. So she's walking along the Malecon for the first time, which is a long stretch of sand against, it's like a walkway that's next to the most famous beach. And she's saying, teenagers congregate, laughing and joking around. Young couples stroll hand in hand, their walk punctuated by the occasional kiss. Ice cream vendors pepper the landscape. Farther afield, people fish off the seawall. One day, will all the beautiful old buildings be torn down and replaced with high-rise condos, touting this unparalleled view of the Caribbean? So when you read something like that, you're like, I want to book my ticket right now. I have to see it before it all goes away.
Yeah.
And to Ahlam's time travel point, you get a really nice mix of modern-day Havana, as well as the grandmother's 1940s or 1950s Havana. So I think it does a really beautiful job of that. My main criticism of this is that the love story felt really cheesy. It almost felt as if, it was thrown in there because every good story needs a good love story.
Yeah, but they need to be good.
Yeah, it needs to feel real. And this one didn't. It was kind of like they are drawn together really quickly and there isn't time for it to develop. And then there are just really cheesy lines like this one. I've avoided, hold on, it says here, I was aware of his body taking up space on the car's bench seat next to me. The gap between the whisper of my dress floating in the breeze. I mean, give me a break. So when you read stuff like that, you're like, it doesn't compare to the travel element and all this research and extra work that was put into the world building in this novel. And then the love story kind of let me down. But if you are a fan of all things Cuban, I think this is a good introduction to a very complicated but beautiful place.
This could be a very expensive show for me. Sorry.
I missed that, sorry. The time period, so it goes back and forth, flashbacks between the main character, Marisol, in 2017, and her grandmother in 1958, who's the daughter of a sugar baron, kind of a very wealthy Cuban family that ends up having to flee because of the political tensions. So, it has a lot of these political tensions, these dramatic, this saga love stories. But for me, there was a slight letdown. But the dress on the front is really pretty.
Yeah, I feel like Cuba is like the perfect location to pick in terms of time travel because it's just so gripping for some reason. I just, you imagine colors, you imagine warm people, you imagine music and dancing and food and just like character, so much character. I love it, love the
exactly.
choice of the book.
And you get those descriptions, it gets that fix for you. So all these descriptions of those old convertibles that are bright colors against the buildings, the beach, you really feel like you're there. It's beautifully done.
Love it. Great choice.
I love what you said about like nostalgia's come up quite a bit today, which I think is quite interesting because when I was looking at travel and books, I was thinking always, okay, you know, the stuff I love is places I've never been before, you know, stuff that I can aspire to, like someday, stuff that I will save up for, like one big massive blowout trip where I travel the world. And there's nothing like easy about it. It's all challenging. There are sled dogs. There's some undersea exploring. If I could go in a submersible to see the Titanic, I would. You can't do that anymore though, and it used to cost an awful lot of money. But when I was thinking about this, I was always like looking towards the future. I wasn't looking back. And I think it's really interesting that your focus has been, well, somewhat kind of like time travel in the past.
Yeah.
And there's actually something that I wanted to read you, because one of the places that I'm most kind of sad about the fact that not many of us will ever have the chance to know is a particular site that I've always wanted to see in person, and I know is never going to happen. And it's the sun rising over the Earth and seeing it from the International Space Station, like seeing the Earth from space. And it's a privilege.
So sad.
I am.
You could, baby. You could.
I don't understand not being sad about, like, it's the pinnacle for me of what you could experience in terms of the like exploring the unknown, either that or being in the Mariana Trench. I'm very jealous of James Cameron. But yeah, and one of the things that I found was they interviewed astronauts about kind of how do you describe space to people who haven't been. And there was an astronaut called Luca Parmitano, and he said that we haven't yet developed the words to truly convey the realities of spaceflight. The building blocks of modern human communication, words, are necessarily constrained by meaning and connotation, no matter which language you choose. And it says in brackets, Parmitano speaks 5, so he would possibly know. And until the mid-20th century, there was no need to express what it means to see our planet in the fiercely primeval essence of space. We just don't think in terms of spaceflight, he says. So I think that as a challenge for kind of where to go with language when our physiology hasn't yet grasped what it is to be in that space, you know.
Yeah.
Unintended.
And Annabelle, if there's anything that 2020 has taught us, is that anything is possible. So don't give up.
Yes, indeed.
Highly unlikely, but thank you.
You never know.
You never know.
You never know.
But it is interesting that you have this desire to go everywhere and see everything and experience all these things that are very limited. And I was talking to a friend about this yesterday, that it's so interesting that some people really have that need to go and do that, whereas others are quite content staying in the town where they're from forever.
Yeah.
And maybe going on holiday once a year to a place that they've been before. And they're perfectly happy, which I find that fascinating, that, you know, what we need as humans can be so very different.
Yeah.
I think it also depends on your stage in life. When I was in my 20s, I wanted, you know, the furthest place possible. It's as if I would throw a dart at a map and see, like, where is the furthest point from where I am, and I would want to go there. From Brazil to Costa Rica, Australia, whatever it is. And now my husband is saying, should we do a staycation in Ras Al Khaimah? And I'm like, why? You know, we're fine here in the garden. I think also having young children is quite tiring, and it makes you think differently about travel.
That's something that I wanted to ask you actually, is have things changed since you had kids in terms of how you think about travel?
How they've changed.
In so many ways. How have they stayed the same is what you should be asking.
Well, how have they stayed the same?
In 2 ways I can think of. I don't know if you agree, but I still need to breathe, so that's similar to before. And my preference is to eat as well, although that's optional sometimes.
Yes, I also treat myself by drinking water. That's the same.
Yeah.
I think it's
spoil
just
yourself.
different. Your priorities are different. You're looking for more safety and comfort, maybe. Before, I would have no qualms about getting on a small, rickety propeller airplane that's going to take me up a mountain to some crazy rainforest. Whereas now, even if I'm without the children, I'm like, but my life matters more because I'm their mother, so I have to be careful.
Oh, yeah, I suppose.
Yeah.
So I think I've calmed down a lot, but I'm so glad that I traveled as much as I did in the past. And I think having a desire for new experiences is there. It's just manifests itself differently. So it's maybe not as adventurous, but it's still, far-reaching or that different scope. It doesn't go away, it just changes, it evolves.
You probably have like a few years of calming down where you just need to focus on what's safe and what's easy. And, a few years ago, it was all about, can I put my child to bed for a nap in the middle of the day, which is ridiculous when you're trying to travel somewhere. But then I think when you come out on the other side, I see my friends starting to travel again, like normal people, taking trains places, which is impossible if you need to bring a cot with you. So it's a lot of logistics.
I remember last summer we took a trip to the Cotswolds because I'd read a book. I think it was just a lighthearted romantic book, Katie Ford. I can't remember the name exactly. A Country Escape, something like that. So I convinced my husband. We were in the Cotswolds and it was beautiful. And my kids were just not into it, and it just kind of ruined it for me. I think they're still very, very young, and right now it's about comfort. To Andrea's point, do they have access to a place to nap? All of these little things that you may not think of for yourself. So it just changes slightly, but that feeling of wanting new experiences and to see new things doesn't go away. My son lately has been asking me, Mama, can we travel to Japan instead of Japan? He says Japan. I'm like, what are you watching on YouTube?
That's it, isn't it? My children have been watching something on YouTube and they really want to go to South Florida. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Sounds okay. Yeah. Why not?
My 5-year-old is obsessed with Japan for reasons I'm not sure.
Well, I'd like to join them there. That sounds like a good place to want to go. In the travel industry in the last 10, 15 years, the adventure travel segment has really taken off because people want to, like you say, they want something different from their daily lives. So if that is hiking up Machu Picchu, that's something they'll remember forever if they just sit in an office the rest of the time. And I think
with the rise of Instagram, I was going to say the same thing. So everyone wants that hero shot in some place that looks, majestic, or zip lining or whatever it is. So sipping a cocktail at a 5-star hotel by a pool isn't going to cut it anymore in the same way.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Certainly not if you're in Dubai. We call that like
that's just daily life.
Yeah. It's funny, before living here, I used to, sun and sand and all these things that we have here used to be, have a whole different value to me. Because I lived somewhere that was cold and rainy and, inconvenient on the tube and so on. But now I could probably do without beaches, I think. I get enough of that here. Yeah. And I think a bit of snow and cold and dark would be okay now.
Like Ski Dubai.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
We have everything here.
That's it from us today, but we would love to hear from you, our listeners, about which books you would recommend about or set in your favourite holiday destination. Pop a comment below if you are watching on YouTube, or send us a message on social media. You can also email us on comms@emirateslitfest.com. We will be sending a selection of books to the person who makes the best recommendation, so do keep your comments coming. That is all for this week, but you can join us next time when we will be talking about the authors or books from the Arab world that everyone should know. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.